get started. Thank you all for coming. My name is Sherif.
I'm Jensen.
And we are going to have a lot of fun today going through Rovo agents and how to create them from zero to hero. Has anyone here had any of our talks about Rovo agent creation before? We've done a few of these. Okay, quarter of you. Agent space is moving so fast. So every 6 months, we've updated this talk, we've updated a bunch of content. The technology is getting a lot better, so there's a lot happening in the agent space. If you're here and you've never created an agent before, don't worry, there'll be a bit of content for that too. But we will spend a little bit more time, if you like, if basic agent creation is the 101 course, this is the 201 course, not formally approved, but we're going to call it a 201 course of agents, but we'll touch some basic agent stuff. But today, Jensen and I will focus on no-code agents. All right, let's jump into it. So, a little primer, what is Rovo again? Across all of Atlassian's portfolio, Rovo sits in our platform. It gives you search, chat, and studio. And studio is the place you can go and make stuff across Atlassian. One of those things you get to make are our wonderful new virtual teammates, which we call agents. And many of you have already been creating agents so far since, when did we GA agents?
Oh God, 3 years ago?
No.
Yeah, wasn't it in Anaheim?
Old.
It was Anaheim.
Yeah, maybe.
No, sorry, Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
3 years
That was
ago.
a while back, yeah. And we're getting plenty of good feedback about it. And it's really changed how we work today as we introduce our new virtual teammates to our teams. Many of you here are probably the folks that will set up these new virtual teammates to your team members. Maybe you want to improve a process inside your team, or you want to make your life just a little bit easier. But before we jump into it, let's do a quick poll. Has anyone here created an agent? Hands straight up. Anyone? Pull straight up, straight up, straight up. Okay. Keep your hand up if you've also put that agent inside a automation workflow. Ooh, a handful of people. All right, cool. So we're going to teach you something new today, and we're going to go deep into creating some slightly more sophisticated agents. But if you kept your hand up, congratulations. You win a stat. You're part of a large group that's already been orchestrating agents inside business process workflows across Atlassian's cloud. In the last 6 months, we've had over 2.4 million workflows, so that's automation workflows, Jira automation rules, that have been orchestrated by agents. So a lot of you are already deploying this and taking advantage of our new teammates inside your workflows. All right, what is an agent 101? An agent consists of 4 rough, broad modules. Its identity, so its name and all that kind of stuff. Its knowledge, what information it has access to search. Its instructions, so that's where you'll spend most of your time defining what is the agent going to do, how it's going to do it. And its skills, so these are the tools or its capabilities that it can do, such as commenting on a page, creating a Jira issue, analyzing a bunch of Jira work items, and so forth. Now, most of you, when you create an agent, you'll spend most of your time writing these beautiful prompts.
This is a Sherif prompt.
And you take pride in these prompts because you spend a lot of hours in these prompts. Now, this is an example of one of our agents that we ship out of the box. I'm not expecting you to read all the text there. But many of you have noticed, as you start to create an agent, you'll give it a very basic thing to do. But then you want your agent to do more jobs. So you'll start to give it maybe a bit of a menu of things you can do. Hey, here are the 4 things someone might ask you to help with. Find an existing decision, review a decision, etc. So you start creating these little mini menus, if you like, in your agent prompts. Maybe I'm seeing some nods, so some of you have had a go at that. And then you start putting these little conditions or go-to statements in your prompt. And your agent prompt gets more and more sophisticated. And what happens when your agent prompt gets more and more sophisticated? Does your agent get more reliable or less reliable? Yell it out. Less reliable, correct. So your prompt gets really complicated. And what do we normally tell you when you do this? Break it down into smaller chunks and create a new agent. Now, so many of you have created a lot of task-based agents. So agents that kind of do one thing, one task. But what's new to Studio is you're going to be able to create agents that do a lot more things. So Jensen, let's walk us through all the things that will make us create more reliable and agents that can do more things.
Awesome. Yep, happy to. So basically, when you think about these agents, most of your instructions and the things that you're doing boil down to the instructions, the skills, and the knowledge, right? So the things we talked about before. So what happens when you're building an agent is you either build that task-based, overly simplistic, single job to be done agent, and you have to build a bunch of agents that way, right, to do multiple jobs, or you end up creating these really robust prompts and it's less reliable, right? So something that we just launched is something called scenarios. So essentially, this bundles these into a single concept, and you can have multiple of these within your agent. We also introduced a new field called behavior, and behavior is essentially the tone of your agent, the way you want it to behave all of the time, right? So if you think about how your prompt goes through this, or how the input is, you give the agent input, it runs through the behavior, it runs through the scenario, and then it gives you output, right? So this is a single job to be done. Now, let's say you have multiple jobs to be done in your agent. You essentially give it these if-else statements, right? So if a user asks for you to do this, then I want you to do that. If a user asks you to do thing B, then I want you to do something else. And then your default scenario, the one at the top, you'll notice it does not have a trigger. That's because it's your else statement. This is the one that it will always fall back onto, right? So this will be your core job to be done, and then you can give it additional jobs to be done underneath that.
So my giant, beautiful prompt, I can now break that into smaller chunks.
Yeah.
So for each time I'm expecting a different kind of input from the user, I can model that as a different scenario.
Correct.
And then let me just play back. And the default scenario is what I'll do regardless of everything. It's the else statement.
It's the else statement, yeah.
It's the else statement, cool.
And the important thing to note here is each scenario has its own instructions, its own skills, and its own knowledge.
Why is that?
So let's think about like a service use case, right? So you have, if a user asks, how do I fix my VPN? I want you to respond with a specific set of documentation. I want that VPN page. If they ask a different question that I have not defined, I want you to search through our entire IT knowledge base and give a response, right? And so you can define specific knowledge or specific actions. So maybe somebody wants to report a bug, it goes to Jira. Somebody wants to raise a feature request, it goes to JPD. You can essentially route the skills based on the intent of the question.
So it's almost like if we were creating lots of little agents, we can now put them, the mini agents, as scenarios.
They're mini
the big one.
agents,
Nice.
Exactly.
Like a team of agents.
A team of agents,
Right.
yes, in one agent. So there's 3 basic flows that you go through when you're creating an agent, right? So we want to break it down into 3 steps. First, you're going to identify the problem. What are you trying to solve? Next, we'll build that agent. Then we'll deploy it. And then, of course, we're going to improve and iterate it through testing, right? So once you build an agent, you're not done, right? You have to test it. You have to figure out how it works, figure out where its gaps are, and continue to iterate on that as you go. So when you identify your agent, there's 3 main things that I like to walk people through. So first, you're going to write down the steps. You'll identify the tasks, and you'll find opportunities. So document each step in the workflow. I personally like to draw it out in like a flow chart or like a whiteboard so that I can understand specific items that I can pull them through.
The other tip I had from customers is, put your hand up if you've ever modeled any workflow in Jira automation or whatever. They're actually probably already your existing workflows. Mm-hmm. So if you go back to your existing Jira workflows that you've already built for your teams, you can probably start to identify agent opportunities in each of those workflows and work out, oh, in that step of the workflow, I could replace that with an agent.
Yeah, or take a screenshot, upload it into chat, and have it do that for you, right?
Wait, say that again?
Yeah, you can take the screenshot of that workflow.
Of the Jira workflow?
Yep, upload it to chat.
Yeah.
And just say like, hey, can you help me write an agent that solves this problem?
Give me an idea for an agent that could, that's a great idea. Because Rovo now supports file attachments.
That's right.
Over 40 file attachments coming in here.
Awesome. And then for each of these steps, we want to write down the tasks for them, right? So maybe there's a step that you do, but then there's specific instructions that you do within that task. Then we'll find those opportunities. So where can I put an agent into this specific workflow that will help move me forward? And now previously, before scenarios, you had to make multiple agents to solve this workflow. Now you just need one. So let's think about a specific use case that I deal with every day. So this is based on something that I have to deal with, which essentially is, or thank you for giving me feedback, but every time you click thumbs up, thumbs down, that goes into my queue. You click thumbs ups and thumbs down over 2,000 times a day. That's a lot of feedback for me to read, and I can't actually get through it all if you still want features shipped to Rovo agents. So you gotta pick one or the other. So essentially, I have a workflow where I want an agent to review support tickets, review customer feedback, review specific channels where I'm getting feedback. So maybe that be like Loom recordings or Slack messages or wherever that content is coming in, I can bring it all together. I'll then group those ideas and I'll consolidate them into singular items, right? So if 10 of those items are related to a specific feature, it'll group into that feature idea. I'll then analyze those against my existing roadmap to see if they already exist, right? So if they already exist, I'm gonna ignore them. If they don't exist, I'm gonna make new items on my backlog so I can start tracking feedback and see how exciting people want it, right?
So
it's something people
scanning
need.
customer feedback coming in, find the big themes. If I've already got items in my backlog for it, ignore it. if I haven't put it in my Jira product discovery.
Exactly,
Nice.
right? And the beauty of scenarios, right, is this isn't the only thing my agent can do, right? So I would loop this into a scenario with a trigger, without a trigger, if it's my default. I might also want to write release notes. I might also want to write community blogs, right? So these are things that I'm doing on a weekly basis that I really want to automate. And they're just like the community blog or the template, they're just simple templates that my agent follows in order to write things in the format I want.
So you're giving this agent a promotion, more and more responsibilities to
That's
do,
right.
more and more tasks. Yeah.
Exactly. And freeing up more time for me.
Yeah.
So it's great. Win, win, win.
All right. That's how to identify the opportunity to create an agent. Let's jump in and build that example that Jensen talked about. We'll start with that first and default scenario of looking across the backlog, looking across the customer feedback items, checking if it's already on the Jira Product Discovery backlog and putting that on the list. So you jump into Studio. So Studio is a new app that's available inside your app switcher in your top left corner, and you're going to jump and go create an agent straight away. Now, normally you'll get a prompt with a natural language interface to help you create an agent, but this is the 201 course, so we'll skip that prompt and go to the advanced mode, because you guys all know what you're doing. And this is the agent configuration if you skip it. It's blank. So we're going to start from scratch here and roll our own. First thing we're going to do is add a behavior. Jensen talked to you about this is a new feature that's available in Rovo agents inside Studio. And the behavior describes how you would like the agent to work. I want you to be very precise and accurate, and don't answer the question if you don't know. That might be a good use case for things like help desks or deflecting work. But maybe you're writing some creative writing content and you want an agent to help people with brand guidelines or assistance or give them ideas. So in that case, you would tell the agent to be more exploratory and have lots of ideas. So this is how you would like the agent to behave. So we'll go on and we've defined the agent behavior. So that will happen for all scenarios. Of all scenarios, I want you to act this specific way. The next thing we're going to do is add our first scenario. So the one where we're going to read all that customer feedback that you're sending to Jensen, find those themes, and then put it in there. So this is the giant instruction box inside Rovo Studio in Agents. This is where you'll spend most of your time. Think of this as your IDE and where you'll be doing all the advanced stuff. So let's go back to look at our process flow that we defined. What are we trying to do here? We want to review support tickets, review incoming customer feedback, all the different channels, find the themes, and analyze it against the Jira Product Discovery roadmap. So we'll start writing our prompt. Now, before we do, let's give you some prompting tips. Now, these tips we're about to share with you here today are agnostic of Rovo and everything. They're really just really good prompt engineering skills that you'll build over time. Defining the role and the objectives, breaking it down to smaller steps, giving examples, and spending your time iterating and working out where it fails and improving it. Let's jump into some prompting tips. So the first thing you want to do is think of this agent as a new team member that's just joined your team. What do you do? If you're the manager, you'll tell them what their role is, and you'll give them very clear goals and objectives. Saying the same idea, you want to do this with your agent. You're telling them, oh, I want you to help me analyze customer feedback. Your job is to analyze feedback and make sure things go in my backlog that I don't have feedback items for, etc. And you'll give it a set of objectives. The next thing you want to do is get your new starter, and remember, your new starters just joined your company. They don't have any prior knowledge that's in your mind. So write your set of instructions into steps. And for each step, assume the person you're talking to has no contextual knowledge that you've built over the years. So in this example, we want to say, all right, for every new feedback item that comes in, I want you to read the ticket carefully, find the main issue, write a summary of the feedback item in your own words, and then I want you to group these into ideas, and so on and so forth.
Now, I see a lot of people taking photos.
They're
That's
taking
great.
photos of me, Dora.
I know, that's okay. But all of this is actually in a community blog, so you'll get links to all of these prompts and everything we did, so you don't have to transcribe them down, at least.
But feel free to take photos.
Yeah, you can take
want
photos.
It's totally up to you. Okay, so you'll get this prompt and everything, so you'll have lots of examples. All right, so again, be very specific with your instructions. Assume the person doesn't have the knowledge you have, and write them as detailed as you can. All right, our next tip is give them examples. Many of you do things like performance reviews with your managers, and you look back and you go, what have we done good at? And you cite examples, and you go, what did I not do good at, and what do I need to get better at? Same thing with your agents. So give it an example. So here's an example of some customer feedback that are actually, I would call feature requests. You can also use tables to give the agent definition. LLMs are great at reading Markdown. Markdown is a really basic formatting way to give the agent a more tabular structure. So you could tell it to, here's an example of the findings I want you to return. So I want you to return information in this format. Here's an example. Don't forget, you can also give the agent bad examples. So if you test your agent once and it returns something you don't like, put that as an example of a bad example, and it'll learn over time. Again, you can add as much detail as you like to this, but giving it examples is a really good tactic.
And one thing I'd say is you don't always have to write down the whole example. If you already have this in a Confluence page, for example, you can just go ahead and put that link, right? That smart link directly in your prompt and say, hey, use this as an example. Follow this template. You don't have to write it all down if you already have the content.
I met a customer that in their instruction said to the agent, I want you to follow the business rules on this page. Pasted a link to a Confluence page. Then they got their business users to, all they have to do is maintain a table in Confluence, and the agent uses that logic in that table to assess the specific use case they were trying to do. So it's a really good technique. Your agent gets smarter as you just keep updating the page. Sounds like magic, but it's not really. All right, the next prompting tip is, I think, where you'll spend most of your time. Most people that talk to us that do an agent will write a simple prompt, run it once or twice, and they go, oh, that's pretty cool. And then they'll run into all the issues as they start putting it with real production data. This is the difference between an agent that kind of works 60% of the time and 80, 90% of the time. You want to spend your time finding out when you run your agent, where did it go wrong, and then coming back and improving your prompt. This is the highest value item you could do. As an example, the top item here, first time we ran this agent, we found that sometimes it returned a bunch of feature requests that it found in the backlog, so from customer feedback, but it didn't reference the Jira Product Discovery link, and we want that link. So we came back to our prompt and said, if you're gonna give us a feature request, always provide the Jira link, right? And you wanna keep iterating on these things. Try it in different scenarios, try it with different data sets, and keep giving it those additional considerations, or find the scenarios where it doesn't work, come back to the prompt and improve your prompt. This is the highest value thing you could be doing. All right, we have written our prompt for our first scenario, right? And we're gonna put it in the instructions here and paste it straight in. Remember, you can write in Markdown format if you like, and that is a good way to give it a bit more structure there as well. We've just finished our prompt. The next thing we need to do is give the agent some knowledge. So let's explain what knowledge is. So this is the information the agent has access to search from. For example, there are 3 things you could do. You could tell it, I'm happy for you to have access to all of the teamwork graph. Obviously, it respects the permissions of the caller. In that case, if you're connected apps to Rovo Search or Rovo, they'll appear there, first and third-party apps. So that means it'll search all of your Jira, your Confluence, your SharePoint, etc. You can also tell the agent, I only want you to use these specific sources of knowledge, these apps, or if you're using Jira and Confluence, these specific spaces or these specific projects. You're narrowing what it could search from to these specific items. The last thing you can do is, I don't want you to use any additional knowledge. Now in that specific scenario, the agent will use its general knowledge, like its large language model knowledge. It won't be using search to try and find additional requests. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Yep. So let's keep going. All right, so you've configured the agent's knowledge and you've put that in there. Now, one thing, the tip Jensen gave you earlier, by the way, for agent's knowledge, if you want your agent, let's say you're building an agent for a help desk use case, and you've got a connected Confluence space, and you want your agent only to search that Confluence space, what would you do?
If I only wanted that space, I would put it in as knowledge, right? So I want it to search across the whole space.
Okay.
It doesn't know where it's going to be inside that space.
Now, let's say I'm creating another agent. Now, this agent, I want it to follow the specific logic I've defined on a Confluence page. Do I configure that as knowledge?
No, because you actually don't want to run a search, right? So you're not running a search on a whole instance. You just want it to read a page. So if you want your agent to just physically read a page, just throw that link in the prompt. Right? You don't need to run search. That's a different plugin behind the scenes, and it actually just will be a distraction to the agent.
Cool. All right. Last thing for us to do is give the agents some skills. Rovo got skills. I'm going to use that line all the time. So now when you add skills inside Rovo Studio, you'll get our new skills library. And this is one of my new favorite features because you can finally see all the things you have access to play with. You'll see a lot of first-party skills, so the skills Atlassian has, and third-party skills, as well as a new feature that I know many of you have asked for ability to support MCP. So that means if another vendor like HubSpot or whatever has an MCP, a public MCP, your org admin can go in and set that up. And all the tools that HubSpot has are now available to your teams as Lego pieces to use inside their agent. By the way, if you're using agents in the last 6 months, you may have heard the word actions in the UI. Skills is the new actions. So skills is the new word we're using for that. So what kind of skills exists? As I mentioned, there are the out-of-the-box skills, so like create stuff in Jira and Confluence and all that kind of stuff. You'll see your org admins in early access now can add MCP servers, which will give you a mountain of skills available to you. So you can mix and match different skills from those different apps that you have and use them to create more agents. So if you've got a marketplace app installed in your Confluence or Jira, and maybe chat to that vendor and see if they've got some Rovo skills exposed that you could use to create more agents with. And lastly, you can create skills with Forge. Forge is our code development platform, and you can do that. And many organizations create Forge-based skills that are internal to their company. As an example, inside Atlassian, we have an agent called Customer 360. It's one of Jensen's favorite agents. What does it do?
Yeah, so it can actually search our internal knowledge base, right? So we have internal tools that essentially have our customer subscriptions, it has seat counts, it has usage, it has AI credit, like AI usage.
Think all custom systems, Postgres databases, like things all over the place.
Yeah, and so it doesn't make sense for us to obviously make that a third-party connector. It's not actions that or skills that make any sense to you. So we built that custom coded for Atlassians, and so we can create custom agents that grab those skills, as well as other skills we want our things to do, right? So maybe I want to search and do things in that database, but I also want to write Confluence pages. I can bring those together into a single agent.
So our IT team built a custom Forge app that exposes that as a skill. So as an example, one of the skills is I can look up a customer's customer satisfaction score, but anyone building an agent can use that feature in many of their scenarios. So they've exposed, if you like the Lego analogy, they've exposed a new Lego piece for you to play with, and you can mix and match that across many agents. All right, so our agent now has a bunch of knowledge and a bunch of skills available to them. And let's go back and we can see the scenario we have just created. So the first scenario we said, it's first role, if you remember, take all that customer feedback, identify themes and analyze it, and go and create Jira tickets from it.
Yeah,
right.
But that's just one, right? And so we want our agent.
This agent a promotion, I forgot.
This agent has multiple jobs to be done, right? So we'll create scenarios for these additional things. So we can also have it write release notes. We can have it draft community blogs. We can have it do a bunch of different things, right? So it's not limited anymore to a single job to be done. Now,
Jensen, question. What are those little toggle things? Can I turn scenarios off and on?
Yes, you can turn scenarios off and on.
Oh, that's really cool. What's that useful for?
It's really good for testing, right? So if you want to see what it's like when you're building it and you want to turn it on and off and essentially see if you're routing correctly, you can do all of those things there. Perfect. Now, how does your agent know when to go to these specific scenarios, right? So the default scenario that Sherif built had no trigger because it's our else statement, right? So we essentially need to build if statements into the other ones. So when you build these triggers, and we'll call them scenario triggers, there's 3 main rules you want to follow. You want to be very specific and focus on intent, so clearly define these activation conditions, right? You want to use clear examples, so give sample queries that should and should not trigger it, right? And then you want to give it a single responsibility. Essentially, your triggers are your orchestration, right? So it's going to look first at those triggers to define where it should go. So if you have triggers that kind of contradict each other, your agent's going to get confused, right?
So the words you use in your triggers are really important.
Very
Keep
important.
Coming back to them, iterating on them. If it's firing a wrong scenario, come and revisit those things.
And they're not keyword triggers, right? Like they're using an LLM, they're routing based on orchestration, so you need to put actual content in there. Don't just put a single word. So, for example, for those scenarios we just talked about, let's say I want to prepare release notes. So I say, hey, when a user expresses intent to draft, write, or prepare release notes, I want you to do this. Some positive examples include these 3. Some negative examples include these 3. And I would do the same thing with writing community posts, right? So you want to be really specific. You don't have to get this in depth, but I do recommend you do. So now when we go back to our scenarios, we also want to test. Right? So we've built in a new feature which allows you to test your agent directly within Studio. So now you don't have to be in multiple windows and multiple tabs trying to test it and iterate it. We brought it all together. So you want to test that your triggers are triggering correctly, that your scenarios are following your instructions, that your skills are working correctly. And so you really want to test all of these things out so you can go ahead and iterate and add those advanced prompt examples and rules into your prompt. So we've built it, we've tested it, now we need to deploy, right? So if you go into Studio, we have a new tab here called Users and Permissions. We've had a lot of feedback, probably mostly from me. When you create agents, you really want to add other people to help you build those, right? You don't want to be the sole owner behind your agent. You want to actually add people to help you collaborate. Now, if I go on vacation, I can give Sherif the responsibility to go update that agent, and it doesn't land solely on me.
I don't know if I like that feature.
I think it's a pretty good one. So the other thing that we've also found is a lot of people don't want their name as the byline of the agent.
You don't want to be famous, Jensen?
I don't want to be famous. I don't want people to know how to find me.
Why would you not want your name in front of the agent? You're the owner of the agent.
I don't know, I've got hundreds.
Oh.
So now you can actually set an authoring team, right? So this essentially allows a team to vouch for this agent. So this agent can be owned by the product efficiency group. So if I go in and I look at chat and I'm searching agents, I can see that it's by them, and I kind of know that they really support this agent.
It's a really good way for your internal teams to feel like an agent is verified by one of the teams. So the marketing brand team would create a marketing brand guidelines agent, and when a customer of that agent inside your company pulls it up, they can see this agent is owned by the marketing brand team. So it's a really good way to make it feel like official and verified and that kind of stuff.
Yep. Awesome, cool. So now let's get into the exciting part. Let's extend our agent, right? So we've deployed it. Now, how do we make it do things automatically for us? How do we make sure that we can actually pull ourselves out of this workflow so that we're more efficient? So now inside of your agent configuration, there is a new button called Event Triggers, right? So you can extend this agent into automations directly from your agent configuration. Previously, you had to go and you had to create an agent, and then you had to go to automations, then you had to find the agent, you had to add the node, then you had to add the prompt, and then you probably went back, and you kind of end up in this multi-tab situation, right? So now you can start directly from here. You just click Add a Trigger, you get the natural language instructions, you give it a trigger, you give it a prompt, and that lands you directly inside of automations.
Now, we're using the word trigger a lot, so we just want to make sure you guys are clear. This is the trigger for when we want the agent to wake up and do something automatically. The triggers we defined earlier were the triggers that when someone types in what to do. So this is kind of triggers for automation. So that's when you put the agent in kind of like an autopilot mode, whereas the triggers before are scenario-based triggers, which is in this scenario, I want you to do this, if that makes sense.
Prompts versus events.
Yep, good way to think about it.
Yep. So essentially, you'll land in this place where you'll have the trigger, and then you'll have the use Rovo agent. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can build automations. There's a lot of good tips that we want to sort of break down before we build this automation any further. So when you're building an automation, it's important to do 4 main things. So you want to make sure that you're triggering a scenario, you're including an action, you're logging a response, and we'll walk through ways to use advanced outcomes. So if you're triggering a scenario, right, think about when we were building those triggers earlier, is you essentially want to make sure when you're prompting this agent in the automation that it's routing to the correct scenario. So make sure you include an example here that matches your trigger statement. So for example, you have review the last 7 days of feedback, draft release notes for this release, draft a community blog. And this will make sure that it hits that scenario and follows the instructions you want.
A good mental model here is what would the first user type for that scenario to kick off?
So do the same thing, the same thing you would write in chat, right?
Yep. Okay, the next tip is to include an action. What do we mean? Well, I just set up my agent with a bunch of skills. Remember, we gave it some skills from HubSpot and all that kind of stuff. If you're putting your agent in automation, you need to define those actions inside automation because you're now creating a deterministic flow. So every morning at 7 a.m., Jensen doesn't want to do her job, and she wants the agent to automatically analyze the feedback for her, right? So we're going to pull in our sidekick agent, and then we're going to tell it, then after you've done that, what am I going to do? Now in automation, you can choose from dozens of actions, Atlassian built actions for like creating Jira issues or Confluence pages, to those third-party ones I spoke to you about, and even those new ones that are in early access, those MCP servers that your org admins can connect, and they can be available here. So in this case, I want the agent to wake up every morning at 7 a.m., read all the feedback, and then when it's finished, I want it to create a page in Confluence. I'm going to put the agent's response inside the Confluence page. So every morning, Jensen's getting a report delivered straight to her, Confluence with all the customer feedback that's available to her.
And something to note is, notice how the smart value of agent response, that is the output of that Rovo agent node, right?
That's the brace thing.
So that's the same response you would get like in chat. So if you asked that, review the last 7 days of tickets in chat, and it gave you a response, you're doing the same exact thing here, and then you're basically taking the copy of that response and putting it in the output, wherever you want that format to be.
Yeah. Once you've got a variable, for those of you, anyone here use automation fairly sophisticated way? Yeah, if you don't know, automation has lots of advanced things you can do with variables. You can inspect the string, you can split it, you can do a bunch of stuff. So think of it as like, I've just got a value from the agent, which is its big blob response, and now what am I going to do with it? So that's the kind of thing you do with it. All right, let's go through another example. So we've got that. You've got the agent response. Things won't, believe it or not, won't always work the way you expect. And you need to kind of troubleshoot what happens. What do you typically do when if you're writing code, you've done it before, you want to log it, like spit out what you're thinking at the current state. So inside automation, you could use an action that allows you to log the specific values that the agent returns. So remember in chat, you type something, you get a blob, and it comes back and gives you a response. In automation, you can't see what that is, right? So the way you can see it is take that response, put it in a log action, which means it'll spit out the log output. Like I think of it as a terminal, giving you feedback of what the agent's currently responded. And you can use that to troubleshoot and make sure that the agent's doing or returning the thing that you expect. All right, let's go to a slightly more advanced things you can do inside automation. Now, many of you out there many of the agents you create need to do things to a set of Jira work items. For example, every morning, in our example, every morning at 7 a.m., look at all the new tickets raised, and for each ticket, I want you to do something. Maybe you're analyzing customer feedback, or maybe you're looking at new items that came into your marketing, creative design, blog queue, and you need to write a draft blog, all that. Anything you need to do a set of Jira issues. So every morning at 7 a.m., if you use the scheduled trigger, so that's the green box at the top, what that does is a really cool thing. You define your JQL query, so that's your Jira search query, for what you want it to look at. So every morning at 7 a.m., I want you to find all issues that were updated in the last 13 weeks, or it could be all new tickets or tickets of this type, whatever it is you want to do. And when you do that, guess what automation does for you? It loops through every result in a separate automation rule. That means you don't have to go through each of the tickets yourself and write a for loop yourself. It will do that for you. So for each customer feedback, read the customer feedback item and identify it's already in my backlog. It'll loop through all of those examples that we went through. So let's say Jensen had 100 tickets the night before. It'll loop through all 100 tickets for you. You don't have to do anything based on that JQL query that you gave it.
Great.
Let's turn it up a notch.
Okay.
What's an even more advanced thing we could do
Let
with
me tell
agents?
you. Okay. So something that's my favorite thing to do with Rovo agents and automations is have an agent actually do something based off of more of a advanced output, right? So let's say that I want to review those last 7 days of feedback, and then I want to act upon the items in JSON outputs, right? So I can write a prompt that specifically says, hey, I want you to group these items, and then within that group, I want to define specific smart values, right? And then do something based on those objects. So let's break that down for a second. So if I go into my issues, right? So let's say I had 50 items of feedback. So a bunch of tickets came in, and then I want to essentially group those into themes and then assign values to those themes. So I would essentially say, okay, within this specific idea, I have a summary, description, type, and related feedback. So those aren't tickets. These are like groups of ideas that come together as a unique feature request.
So you're taking the message response from the agent, the big blob of text,
and I'm putting it in formatted.
Making it structured in a format called JSON, which is just a fancy way for the agent to return in a more structured format.
Exactly.
And then you're looping through each of those?
Correct. And each of these values, so summary, description, type, related feedback, those all become smart values. And then I can use those smart values in later nodes within my automation. So then another thing I could do is I could essentially then put a condition after that. So I've branched this now based on each of these ideas. And I can say, okay, if the type is existing, I don't want to do anything with it.
So if you've already got existing customer feedback, ignore it.
Don't need it.
Right.
I want to look at new feedback, and I want to make sure I have action items from that new feedback. So I can essentially say, okay, for each of those things, each of those branches of ideas, I want you to create a work item in JPD. And so now I have my backlog automatically updated based on customer feedback. So that's like saving me thousands of hours a week, probably.
You're not doing any work by now.
No.
What do you do?
I don't know why I'm here. Awesome. So let's build this out together, so step by step. So if we go back to our automation, you'll see we have that scheduled trigger. And we'll say, hey, every day at 7 a.m., I want you to do something. The first thing we'll do is we'll add our Rovo agent. You'll notice it has that JSON blob. The beginning of it has the trigger for my scenario. Review the last 7 days of tickets. So that's my first tip. Then it's going to go ahead and respond as a JSON blob. And so it'll create these objects.
So you're saying then, instead of responding with just a bunch of paragraphs, respond to me in a more structured way so I can loop through it.
Yeah, and I just put it in the automation, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have to put this in my agent prompt. It's going to go ahead and layer on top of that and give me the result in the way I want it without impacting my agent's responses in chat. So then I'll branch off those ideas. So each of those groups of tickets will then become their own identity that we'll do actions off of, right? So then I will then do a smart condition that filters out all the existing and only gives me new. So that says, okay, only do actions on the new ones. Then I create that Jira work item. It has the project it wants it to be in. It has the work item type. And then I can go ahead and put those smart values, like the idea summary, the idea description, and then links to all of the related feedback items. So it's all in one place. I can go and I can find them, and it's going to run every week.
All right, let me play that back. Every morning, wake up, agent comes in, read the last 7 days of tickets, find any, return me all the feedback in this structured format that I've told you to do.
Correct.
Once you return all that structured format, I'm going to loop through that list. Check, is this thing already in the backlog? Yeah, it is. Ignore it. Is that right?
Correct.
Do nothing?
Do nothing.
If this one's in the backlog, if this one isn't in the backlog, add it to my Jira Product Discovery, and you're kind of like now automating your feedback flow with your customers.
And it doesn't have to stop here, right? You can get a ping about it. You could get this ping like,
every morning, this agent does message Jensen and I in Slack with a summary of all the feedback as well.
That's
so
true.
we read that. Well, sometimes we read that. It's a lot of feedback.
yeah, but this would, we should add this in here. So essentially, the last thing would be, okay, send a Slack message consolidating all of the new roadmap items you added based on feedback. And that'd probably be an easy way to read it. We need an upgrade to our agent.
Give it a promotion.
Okay. Awesome. So the other great thing about triggers inside of Studio is now you actually can see where these automations are for this agent. So every time your agent is used in an automation, no matter who creates it, it will show up on this event triggers list. So I have 3.
So the problem this helps you guys solve is a few of us have told us that have started to use your agents inside automation. I don't know if someone else has used my agent inside automation and what rules it used in and who else is getting value out of this agent.
Yep.
So this is like an audit list.
It's kind of like an audit list, yeah. And you
everywhere
can know,
this agent is working in an automation rule.
Yeah, and so you'll know if I change the prompt to something, what will it impact, right? Will I break this across the board? If I change something, if I do something to this agent, if I delete this agent, who will this actually break it for? Cool. So all of this is in a community blog post. So if you wanted to read the prompts, it has additional prompts for those additional scenarios we didn't work through, as well as some extra ones that I threw in there for fun. And then it also has all of the rules for building that automation, as well as a JSON export. So you can just upload it. You don't have to build the automation, which is handy. So now that everybody's got that, let's recap.
All right, we've been through a lot today. Hopefully you learned a few new things. Let's go through the whole life cycle together. Identifying an agent use case. Remember, map out the use case, write it down. Jensen wrote down kind of her workflow that she does every day. But remember, if your team is already using Jira, you've probably already got a workflow defined in your Jira workflow or your actual automation rule. Just go look at those. There are probably heaps of opportunities to add agents to those workflows. Remember to define the role and goals, break down the thing into smaller steps and give it examples, bad examples and good examples. When you start building your agent, remember we now have a new thing called behaviors. That's how I want you to act across all of scenarios. Be very precise or be creative. Like that's the kind of stuff you put into it. Scenarios help you create agents that can do more tasks. So instead of having to create one agent for each task, you can start to add more and more sophistication to your agents. Scenarios, you need to define when they get triggered. When the user types this, I want you to do that. That's what a scenario trigger is. When you deploy the agents, don't forget, you can now share them with your team, which is a highly requested feature by many of you. You can also set the authoring team. And please spend most of your time in that deploy test loop. That's where you'll get all your value. Finally, when you're ready to put this thing on autopilot, play with agents inside Atlassian automation. Don't forget, in automation, you can trigger the different scenarios at every morning at 9 a.m. I want you to do that. But then you need to write your scenario as if someone was typing it inside the automation rule. Don't forget, you can define your actions in automation. Use the automation debug log action to debug when things go wrong. If you ever want to loop through a set of Jira issues, there's a cool automation component called scheduled. So every morning at 9 a.m., loop through this JQL set of issues, and it'll do that automatically for you. So for each issue, I've got to stop saying issue, it's called work item now. So for each work item, go and do this and go and do that. And lastly, if you want to get really fancy and do some advanced things, remember the agents just return a blob of text, like a conversation, a chat message. To make that useful for you to do something more advanced, get it to return something structured. And that's what JSON is for. Tell it to return a JSON output. Jensen's got lots of examples of how to tell it to do that. And then you can start to loop through its output and do some fancy things. Thank you so much for your time, folks. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.